snake jazz.
Zora Neale Hurston, born in 1891, grew up in the all-black town of Eatonville, Florida. When she was just 13, Hurston's mother died, which led her to stay with various relatives until she was old enough to live on her own. After making her way north during the Great Migration, she went to college both at Howard University in Washington, D.C., studying under writer and educator Alan Locke, and at Barnard College in New York, where she studied under anthropologist Frank Boas. Hurston's writing career took off as she joined other African-American artists in the Harlem Renaissance. Hurston's style was all her own, refusing to cater to white America's idea of black people and culture, but also not writing to lift up her race. This led to criticism from other Renaissance writers, such as Langston Hughes.
Hurston truly was just an amazing writer. I mean, the way she applies her studies of anthropology and vernacular of Southern African American communities into her writing style and dialogue, it's a brilliant tactic. She really transports her readers. It's quite a shame that a lot of her ideas presented still had to be further edited and censored by the white patrons sponsoring her before they could reach the public. It really makes you think about the potential her stories had.
After her death in 1960, Hurston's legacy faded until her work resurfaced in the 1970s with the help of writer Alice Walker, who helped to give it the credit that it deserves for its anthropological and literary mastery.
Jazzy! Vivacious!
Revolutionary! Each of these words encapsulates the vibe of the Harlem Renaissance. Full of black artists, poets, writers, musicians, and more, the growth of Zora Neale Hurston's career started in the Manhattan neighborhood of Harlem, where African American culture was being reborn in the 1920s. Growing contributions to American society were being instilled in this 3-square-mile neighborhood. This brought the needed pride, definition, and activism to the black American community, further leading to the opposition of racial injustice and the birth of the civil rights movement.
Whoa. Back the heck up. How did such a large African-American cultural movement happen in New York instead of in the South where there were so many black people living at the time?
Well, after the Confederates lost, the white supremacists in the South did everything they could to steal the rights away from now free black people. That's right. They came up with sharecropping, which removed black people's chances of owning land, which reduced their chances of accruing general wealth. You see where this is going. They also passed legislation called Black Codes and Jim Crow law and did everything they could, including murdering, to keep white supremacy alive. Now, basically, black people got the hell out of there and moved north in huge numbers because factory work paid better and cities were a little safer. Families moved where they knew other people and whole communities were formed. This was what we call the Great Migration. Now riddle me this. What happens when you have better education, better living, and all kinds of great minds together in one spot? Bingo! Harlem Renaissance, baby! Hurston's story, Sweat, focuses on Delia, a hard-working washerwoman, and her leech of a husband, Sykes. They've been married for 15 terrible years, and Delia needs to get out. Delia works hard. She bought their house. Oh, right. Women's rights don't exist. Cool! Opening scene. Sykes judges Delia for doing white people's laundry. Then he tricks her into thinking his whip is a snake, and like Indiana Jones, she's scared of snakes. Sensible. Cut to the Porch of Exposition, a storefront with old guys on it who know everyone's business. They let fly that Sykes is cheating on Delia with a rather rotund woman named Bertha. No, Jim. Not that Bertha. When Sykes tries to drive Delia out, she refuses to give up the house she worked so hard to pay for. Later in the story, Sykes brings home a snake just to with Delia and keeps it contained in a box outside the house as an attempt to scare Delia away. As this plot fails, Sykes goes on a step further and releases the snake into the house. Naturally, this doesn't go to plan, and Delia manages to escape to the barn, but Sykes gets munched on by the starving critter. In the end, Sykes is dealt a vengeful blow by karma as Delia watches him suffer the consequences of his reckless actions. Hurston's tone throughout the short story is one of support for the working black woman and against the entitled, abusive husband. She addresses the sexism of the South in the 1920s by having Delia develop her own voice and make her own decisions independent from her husband. This allows her to stand up for herself throughout the story. For example, near the beginning of the story, when fighting with her husband after he scolds her for cleaning white people's laundry, Delia grabs a skillet and prepares to defend herself. Sweat concludes with Delia having the last laugh in her relationship with Sykes as he is bitten by the venomous rattlesnake. Delia, although repulsed, watches without helping her husband. As Delia comments earlier in the story, Sweat, whatever goes under the devil's back, is got to come up under his belly. To help analyze the symbolism, illusion, and theme in Hurston's story, we brought in a few experts on the subject.
It's really quite impossible to address this book without discussing the biblical allusions present. I think my wonderful colleague Mary Jane Lupton puts it best when she says, "Sweat is an Adam and Eve in reverse. A very unblissful bower, which is made peaceful when the snake bites the man."
I mean, Delia's singing of the verses, Jordan water, black and cold, chills the body, not the soul, is very obviously a biblical allusion to the Israelites crossing the Jordan River to escape slavery. This is a very obvious parallel to the almost slave-like experience Delia escapes when her husband Sykes finally dies.
I mean, the overall theme of the story is just don't be a dick. The story is about a woman who everyone in the town really likes, but she still has a horrible life because she's married to such a sucky guy. I mean, he even brings home a snake to try and scare her away, but the plan goes completely and he ends up getting killed because he's a The entire town hates him, but he thinks he owns it, but that's just not true at all. So when he needs help the most, when he's dying, no one helps him because he's a The moral of the story is just don't be a dick or you'll get f***ing murked.